and it's Reconciliation Week, and I'm driving on my way across the other side of Geelong, the lovely bank, to visit a fellow Salvo who is on a very exciting journey. Discovered recently that she has Indigenous heritage, and she's currently in the process of trying to find out more about that line. And yeah, that's what we're doing. We're on our way over there. So that's the fun part of the morning. But this week is Reconciliation Week, and if there's ever a time for us to take Reconciliation Week seriously, it's now. And for me, growing up in Australia, although I came out from England when I was 8 years old, growing up in Australia has meant that we have been part of this culture. We've learned Australian history. We've met Indigenous people along the way. But it's only been in the last 10 years since I've been grounded here on the Bellarine Peninsula, which is near Geelong, that I've actually started to discover more about the Indigenous heritage, but also my family connection to Australian Indigenous heritage. So we recently discovered that my ancestor, my great-great-great-great-grandfather, Thomas Hobbs, came to Australia as a convict in the late 1820s, and in the mid-1830s he got his ticket of leave, and like all the other convicts of the time, most of them became sheep farmers, and he came across from Tasmania to the Bellarine Peninsula, where I live now. Ironically, I'd never heard of the Bellarine Peninsula when I moved here. The Salvation Army sent us here to serve on the Bellarine Peninsula, and then while we're here we learn that this is where my ancestor was sent. Almost like God was trying to tell us something really important. So they came into Point Henry. If any of you know Geelong, Point Henry is the old base for Alcoa, the old steelworks. It's like another little mini peninsula off into Corio Bay, which is presently just over there. So that's where my ancestor came in over there, and it was in that early period of history where that we started to discover some quite chilling things about the history of Australia. One of the things being that my ancestor came over and was part of the Port Phillip Association. The Port Phillip Association was a group of people, a mixture of politicians, military experts. Really, it's like the perfect colonizing tool, which was set up by the British Empire. They have been using this strategy for many years, and the people involved, like Charles Swanson and Mercer and Batman, all these people had been involved in military operations of colonizing countries. So they'd come from Charles Swanson especially, had come already from India, and the takeover of Mauritius, the colonizing of Mauritius. So they were experts. That was with the India Company. They were experts of going into other people's countries, taking over them, implementing governments, economies, just what every empire would do, and making them slaves to the empire. And so when these guys came to Australia, well, initially to Tasmania, they did that first in Tasmania, and headed up by Governor Arthur Phillip. They took the whole of Tasmania by force, and they formed a line from the top of Tasmania, a horizontal line of people, whoever they could find, any kind of worker, mostly convicts, police, anyone they could find. They gave them a gun, and they walked all the way down through Tasmania, taking out every Indigenous person. And of course, John Batman was part of this, one of the coordinators of this. And after the success of that project, got involved in the next area of takeover, which was the area of Port Phillip, otherwise known now as the Bellarine Peninsula and Melbourne and the Mornington Peninsula. So what happened was these soldiers, that's what they were trained soldiers mixed in with politicians, lawyers, doctors, as I say, they're the colonising team that were experts at colonising. They were paid by the Scottish banks and probably British banks, English banks too, but most of those Scottish, and so they came into the Bellarine Peninsula in the 1830s and started to colonise it. And they set up perimeters, they set in squats. All their squats are recorded in the 1840 map of settlement here in Victoria, and you can find those maps online. But they're there to be found, and you can see who all the major landholders were and who was really part of the Port Phillip Association. So it's interesting because a lot of the places today are named after them, and you can dig around in there and find out. So they came in, they took the land by force, they killed Aboriginal people, poisoned them, shot them, rounded them up. In Western Victoria, some of the most brutal stories of barbarianism towards humanity done by these early British settlers. And what I'm about to share with you is quite traumatic, so if you don't want to listen to this, maybe skip forward a minute or so. But they would actually rape the women, brutally shove spears into the women's private parts. They would bury the children up to the neck, the babies, and kick their heads off. They would cut them up. They would be absolutely brutal and barbaric. It is disgusting, the reports that came through. So you had these early settlers doing this, and a lot of these were the convicts who'd been treated like dirt, who were now sheep farmers. They had an opportunity to make some money working for these landholders, and so they got paid in land. So if they killed Aboriginal people, they were rewarded. And so my ancestor was one of these shepherds. Now I have no evidence that he was involved or not involved in any of these atrocities, but he was certainly around at the time. He was certainly a sheep farmer, and he certainly got land. That's what I do know. So it's interesting that quite likely he was involved. Quite likely he was ordered and asked to do these horrible things. It's really sad, actually. So this is the history of Australia, and this period of time between like 1810, 1840 is really there's not much recorded. I mean, John Batman was kind of the first official recorder of history. John held a wedge. He was a surveyor. Came around in 1835. They were all connected into this takeover of the region. And so the Scottish banks invested in it, obviously, because they had a lot to gain from it. They invested in this takeover knowing full well that once the land would be sold, they would make an absolute fortune, which is what they did. And the history of this has really not been told. And it should be. It needs to be told because it's wrong. And we are living today in this land of plenty and prosperity due to that colonising. And what's been lost has been the indigenous culture, the indigenous farming methods, land management methods, fishing methods, survival methods, all these things have been lost. And it's sad. It's really, really sad. And there are people today living who are indigenous. They might have white skin. They don't know anything about their history. because three or four, or maybe two or three generations ago, people were stolen away from their parents because they were not treated. Aboriginal children were taken away from their parents. They believed the Aboriginal people could not look after their children because they had been so demonised and treated so poorly for so long. They were still having children. Indigenous people were still having children, and they would have been so traumatised, so broken, so drunk, because that's what they were given. They became the slaves of the early British Empire here, treated like dogs. And is it any wonder that parents struggle to live, let alone be parents? So the judgment on the British Empire for their involvement in this is huge. It's not for me to judge though. I'm not here to judge them, because history will judge them. And my role in sharing this story today is because the story needs to be told. My story is part of this story. And whilst I'm a descendant of the Thomas Hobbes who came to Australia, I am a descendant of the family that was left behind in England. 200 years. Our family in England have no record of this story because they were encouraged, the Australian convicts were encouraged to move on with their lives. They had new lives, not to go back to what they know. Even the Australian descendants of these convicts do not know the fact that their ancestors were convicts, because it was all covered up. It was a shame to be a convict. But now it's kind of like a badge of honour to be a convict, have a convict relative. It's just crazy. So I am sharing this story because it needs to be told. It really does need to be told. And today, William Buckley was so appalled with what happened. Yeah, he went back to Tasmania. He was appalled. And I can imagine if all of his Indigenous family that he journeyed with for 30 years was killed or poisoned or whatever, he would be appalled. He would be really appalled. So there's so much history to think about and reflect on. So much. And I often wonder, what can we do? How can we help? As a Salvation Army officer, I work with Indigenous people, about 20 or 26 Indigenous families that I connect with through my role as a chaplain, and also other families in the community that aren't connected to that school that I'm the chaplain with. But there's so many families, and many of the families have no or very little knowledge of their past, of their Indigenous heritage. It's all been lost. And when you start to hear about kangaroo grass and the farming that they would have, and the yams that were grown, that were everywhere in the ground for Indigenous to eat. When the sheep came, they ate them all up. The wheat was all replaced with British wheat. It's really interesting, really, really interesting how this situation has developed. Their culture was completely wiped out. And it's no surprise today that these Indigenous people know nothing about their history or even want to, and they've been shamed so much to not even want to learn about their history. Cannot possibly understand the magnitude of racism, segregation that's taken place throughout history. Cannot possibly comprehend that, how bad it has been for a society to be so emotionally crippled spiritually crippled that they cannot even fathom the idea of learning about their culture. So I share this today because we want to see that change. And as a descendant of one of those early sheep farmers, I stand and make the commitment today that I work for reconciliation. And whilst it's not about me, it's about what Indigenous people want, what I personally would love to see is Indigenous culture embraced in the everyday. The Indigenous farming techniques, how to tell the weather, how to tell when the best time to burn, how to tell when to farm, how to build sustainable housing, how to learn and trade and communicate. And all these opportunities would be amazing to learn their languages, to speak the language that was spoken here before us would be amazing, like absolutely amazing. Even to be able to greet people with Indigenous words would be amazing. Yeah, I think I'm going to try and find out how I can do that, how I can learn that bit of that language, the least I can do. But yeah, I would love to empower Indigenous people. But one of the things that we have been connecting with is the Narana Creations here in Geelong, and learning about Indigenous culture with Vince Ross, Uncle Vince, and that's been really meaningful. But also we've connected with Australian Olympian and Senator Nova Peris, who's the Order of Australia. She's an Indigenous Australian woman, an amazing woman, who's doing great things for Indigenous Australia, and we're partnering with her, not officially, just in a relationship with her. We seek advice from her. We're getting involved in a few projects with her because we want to show Indigenous people that we are genuinely seeking reconciliation. It's not about us imposing our culture and our wants onto people. It's about her helping us learn to better connect with Indigenous people, to learn the traditions that will help us be more respectful to them. I mean, to actually undo the wrongs of the past is almost impossible. I mean, how do you give back the land to a people who don't even live here anymore? Like, the descendants might be here, but you just can't even possibly imagine where to start in unraveling all this, because everywhere you look around us is a result of colonization. Power lines everywhere. It's just the power. If we just talked about power lines, how do you go about getting rid of all power lines and returning it back to how do you do that? Vehicles, roads, businesses, churches, infrastructure, trains, petrol stations. You look around, everywhere you look is a product of colonialism. And so I just start to sit in this space and go, wow, we need to move forward together. But how do we embrace Indigenous culture? For example, we think it's great to get on a train and go to the city and be there within an hour. That is great. But they would walk everywhere. What's the benefit of walking? What can we learn from that? They would cook outside. They would sit around a campfire. What's the benefit in that? They would hunt. They would hunt what they needed, cultivate the land. They would burn the land regularly to revegetate the land. They lived off the land. They didn't need money. They didn't need food because there was food everywhere. Everyone looked after each other. There were no fences. Think about the fences. Where do you start undoing fences? When you think about colonization, it's really messy. Really messy. So I'm working to at least build relationships with Indigenous people who have a voice, to seek advice from them on how best I can serve them, how best I can empower them, empower their dreams, their passions, their thoughts, because that's what I really want to do. And that's something that I'm really curious about doing. So if you're an Indigenous person in Australia, or if you know of anyone that wants to connect with a white person whose only agenda is to see Indigenous culture empowered, then let me know. I'm not out to do anything other than right the wrongs of my ancestors, and I think as a direct descendant of one of those sheep farmers, it would be an honour to be involved in this process, to be able to say what happened was so wrong. I mean, it's an injustice to the sheep farmers too, because they were just ex-convicts. Many of them were wrongfully just, sent to the other side of the world. Just for my ancestor was sent for stealing a pig and a bale of hay. He didn't have a criminal record. That was the first thing he'd done because they were starving. He needed food. So he stole a pig, bale of hay, got busted. Because of that, he got sent to the other side of the world. Just at the time where the British Empire needed labour to colonise this new land. It's an injustice. So they were treated poorly. They were enslaved to the system. They had all their rights taken away. They were completely abused, and then they became subservient to the empire. It's crazy. But even I think of my ancestors and what they were asked to do was an injustice in itself, all orchestrated by the empire for the benefit of the empire, for the economy of the empire. All people were enslaved so the empire could become economically prosperous. Yeah, nuts. So I think of my ancestor and what he was asked to do, and out of this I hope that we can model a different reality. Right now I'm heading past the Wathaurong Co-op, and the Wathaurong Co-op is a great group of people who are the local Indigenous representatives. The group of people there are wonderful people, but often argue amongst each other. There's tribal rifts, arguing over who was originally here, who wasn't originally here. That's pretty messed up, and that's sad too, to see the division amongst Indigenous people. We think, oh yeah, it'd be great just to be able to go and empower Indigenous people, but there's so many wrongs to right that it's not going to happen quickly. But we all need to work together to do this. And I'm saying I want to be part of this. I want to commit my life to empowering Indigenous culture. And so learning about their practices, putting them into practice, embracing them in everyday life. Like we mow lawns. It's such a British thing to do, mow lawns. But let's learn about flame stick farming. Let's learn about how do we farm such a way to recultivate gum trees, wattle trees, rather than have to plant them. Let's cultivate them because there's dormant seeds in the ground that are ready to come up. Just things like that. So the future, I think, is very bright for everyone. I would love to see an Australia where Indigenous people lead, where their culture is so respected that they are the prominent leaders in our community, where they know what is best for a community. As we point people towards God and listen to Him do what He says, we learn more about their spirituality too, learn about their culture, learn about their religious beliefs, and actually go, wow, look at how God has been working in their culture since the beginning of time. Because he has, he is. He's alive, and he's evident through their cultural practice. Yeah, God is good, really good. So anyway, I think that's a few things for Reconciliation Week to think about, and if you've got any comments, any questions, any criticisms, anything at all, just put it in the comments. You know, I'm not putting myself up as an expert in anything relating to Indigenous affairs or culture, and probably some of the things I've said today have been offensive, and I apologise if they have. Just tell me, where have I been offensive? And know that I'm having a go. I'm out there wanting to have a go. And I know that I'm going to make mistakes. I know that I'm going to offend people, but that is not my intention. I know that people will be skeptical about me. I know that they won't trust what I'm saying, but I'm letting you know that my intention is to build genuine relationships with Indigenous people. And part of any good relationship means working through conflict, working through arguments, not resorting to physical violence or emotional manipulation or bribery or something like that. No, it's working it out. Anyway, I'm Peter from the Salvation Army, and nearly in Lovely Banks. And Lovely Banks is a beautiful place, and the history of this area is pretty brutal as well. I'm going to find out from a friend of mine some information about her Indigenous heritage. So yes, I will be in touch with you soon. Speak to you soon. It's Peter from the Salvation Army. How do I stop this? That is the question. Here we go. How do I stop this? Done.